am the polar opposite of a speedrunner. I don't have much of a competitive drive. To me, climbing up leaderboards and spending dozens or hundreds of hours perfecting a single game sounds like a great way to fall asleep. Nevertheless, if I hear of a fast-paced game coming out that caters to speedrunners, chances are I'm interested, if only to tickle the old adrenaline for a few hours. In my opinion, no genre is better for this sort of experience than a platformer, and thus the sheer speed of Rooftop Renegade's trailers was immediately appealing. But when a game moves very quickly and expects you to keep up, great game design becomes less of a nice to have and more of an absolute necessity. Thankfully, in this regard, this game does not disappoint. Even after playing through Rooftop Renegade, it struck me that I have no idea what the story was beyond that you're a rooftop renegade of some sort, and you're running from a corporation called 𝐦𝐨𝐫𝐞. And you know what? That is completely fine by me. The game gives no pretense that its story is worth caring about, and I don't think there's ever a reason for games who don't want to tell a story to tell one anyway just to tick a checkbox. And Rooftop Renegade isn't the slightest bit worse off for it. Visually, I think Rooftop Renegade has a lot going for it. The levels are bright and colorful, taking you through neon-soaked urban landscapes, desolate lunar mining facilities, and floating cities in the clouds. I do wish there was a bit more environmental variety than just the small handful of templates used, but what's here looks very appealing without distracting the player from the task at hand. Animation is also smooth and adds to the flow of things as you neatly transition from running to sliding to grinding a rail and dashing through a boost portal, barring a few situations where the transition can look a little bit janky. The game performed well on my desktop PC using a 1080 Ti, though I was a bit disappointed by the lack of native ultra-wide monitor support. Thankfully, for those interested in playing on Steam Deck, Rooftop Renegade works great out of the box, though I did have to toggle most settings to medium or low to ensure I was getting a smooth 60 frames per second, which I personally find important for a game this fast. I have to give a shout out to the soundtrack here too. I found most tracks to be enjoyable enough and a good fit for the gameplay, but a few standout tracks were excellent and something I'd legitimately still listen to outside of playing the game. It's a shame that the way they're edited can sometimes be a bit jarring though. You may not notice unless you turn the sound effects all the way down, but songs occasionally have strange transitions or skips that disturb the overall flow. Gameplay-wise, my first impression of Rooftop Renegade was exactly what I think it should be. Wow, this is fast. The game consists of equipping a variety of hoverblades, which from what I can tell are fancy futuristic rollerblades, and blasting through short levels as fast as possible by transitioning smoothly between obstacles and rails and using a few useful powers to do so. For example, there's a dash to speed you up, a short-form teleport called Blink allowing you to circumvent obstacles or close the distance to a platform or rail, and a launch power to boost you upward if you need to get to a rail or platform just out of reach. In arcade mode, ostensibly the game's campaign, you're oriented quickly with a few simple tutorials and then released to play through the rest of the levels, where you'll often be chased by 𝐦𝐫𝐞 drones and shot at by henchmen that try to interrupt your flow by triggering obstacles. As you make your way through the game stages, you'll level up and new hoverblades will unlock, but they aren't just cosmetic. Many of them are required to access the aforementioned tools like Launch or Blink, and each new variation will either give you a new power or reduce the cooldown of existing ones. You can't die or get hurt in Rooftop Renegade, though in some levels you can be caught by 𝐦𝐫𝐞 bots. But hitting obstacles or missing jumps will slow your speed and thus hurt your score by the end of the level and give you less experience for unlockables. Thankfully, the core gameplay feels tight due to responsive, intuitive controls and a blistering sense of speed that clearly pushes the limits of human reactivity. I know I've used this word a couple of times already in this review, but it's easy to sink into a flow state with this game where you're getting through a level from beginning to end without slowing down once was full-on platforming nirvana. On these merits alone, I have to recommend Rooftop Renegade to gamers that sounds appealing to. But I'm going to do so with some caution. While I really enjoyed Rooftop Renegade's moment-to-moment gameplay and presentation, it's truly a shame that it runs out of ideas so quickly. The arcade mode has 24 levels, each taking about a minute and a half to beat. When factoring in the replaying of levels required to unlock some of the later stages, completing all levels in the arcade mode took me less than an hour and a half total. When you consider that the first handful of stages are mostly a tutorial and many of the later stages don't introduce any new ideas, Rooftop Renegade starts to feel a bit light on content. That said, there are some other features definitely worth noting here, the biggest one being a random level generator. While I'm always skeptical of these as a method for providing more content, I have to say, every level I played from it felt just as fun as any of the bespoke levels played in arcade mode, and it's hard to say whether that's especially high praise for the random level level generator, or a bit of a knock on the lack of content and variety in the campaign. Truthfully, it's a bit of both, because while I really enjoyed the randomly generated levels and they helped me unlock all of the hover blades without having to replay things I'd already done, by the time I'd done a couple dozen of them, they started to really blur together and make the game as a whole feel repetitive and a little bit simplistic. If more levels are what you want after playing through the main ones and unlocking everything there is to unlock, there are plenty more to play, but for people like me who require a little more structure, the limited handcrafted content leaves something to be desired. There's also an asymmetrical multiplayer mode where one or more players can play as gunners trying to disrupt the runner. This mode is local multiplayer only with no online play, so my options were a bit limited in terms of testing it out, but if you have some friends and multiple controllers, it can certainly extend the life of the game a bit more. While limited content and repetitive level design are definitely issues in Rooftop Renegade, I do need to highlight a potentially larger one for speedrunners and gamers looking for a stiff challenge. There is very little of it here. I got through a vast majority of the game's arcade mode levels with an A or S rank, the highest one, in a single try, and while the game does require you to replay older levels to level up and unlock new ones, it doesn't actually require you to do better at them, just to play them more, or alternatively play some randomly generated levels. The game's design doesn't provide much in the way of incentive to improve your skills, and the randomly generated levels are even worse in this regard. In literally every single generated level I played, I got the coveted S rank, which felt strange given the number of times I missed obstacles or inadvertently slowed down. At one point, I figured I would try to do badly in one, repeatedly allowing the 𝐥𝐤𝐤 drone to catch up to me and not use my speed power-ups like I should be. But even here, I got an S rank. I'd like to believe this is a bug and not a fundamental issue in the game's design, but it felt more often than not like level scores were more like participation trophies, and we millennials are not really a fan of those. I should re-emphasize that I had a really fun time with Rooftop Renegade. Its gameplay is frenetic and fun, and it gave me some great thrills as I played through its levels and unlocked new hoverblades to play with. But unless you have a group of friends who get really into the local multiplayer mode, or you don't get put off by repeating similar content ad nauseum, there's not much incentive to play for more than a few hours. Because of this, I'd recommend waiting for a sale and hopefully some patches to add content or polish up some of the level scoring issues. At that point, it should easily be worth a go.